For years, she carried everything alone: 3 sons, a dying ranch, and a heart full of silent pain that no one ever saw. People in the town called her strong, fearless, unbreakable, but they only saw her working hands, not her tired soul. Every morning, she woke up before the sun, and every night, she slept after everyone else, hiding her tears in the darkness where no one could hear them. She never complained, never stopped, never asked for help, because she believed that was her duty. To everyone else, she was a hero, but inside, she felt invisible and forgotten. Days turned into years, and nothing changed, until one quiet evening, when a stranger stood in front of her and looked at her differently, not with admiration, but with understanding, and in a soft voice, he asked a simple question no one had ever asked before, and in that moment, everything inside her began to shake. She was known as the strongest woman in the valley, a name people spoke with respect, but never with understanding of what it truly cost her. After her husband passed away, she did not have time to grieve, because life did not slow down for her pain, and the ranch demanded strength she was not sure she still had. She took control of everything, raising her 3 sons alone while keeping the land alive with her bare hands and endless determination. From sunrise to sunset, she worked harder than anyone, fixing what was broken and hiding what was hurting inside her. People saw her standing tall and believed she was unbreakable, but they never noticed how quiet she had become, how her smile slowly faded with each passing day. Deep inside, she was exhausted, not just from work, but from carrying a life that never once asked if she was okay. From that silent weight she carried, her days moved forward without pause, each morning pulling her out of bed before the sky even changed color, forcing her tired body to begin again as if rest had never mattered, and she stepped outside into the cold air where the ranch waited for her like an endless responsibility that never showed mercy, fixing broken fences with rough hands that had forgotten softness, feeding animals that depended on her strength, guiding her sons with a calm voice even when her own heart felt heavy, making sure they never saw the cracks she tried so hard to hide, and as the sun climbed higher, her work only grew harder, sweat mixing with dust while her mind stayed trapped between memories of the past and fears of the future she never spoke about, because she believed silence was the only way to survive. And no matter how exhausted she felt, she never allowed herself to stop, never allowed herself to be weak, even when her body ached and her spirit quietly begged for relief, and people passed by with nods of respect, calling her strong, calling her brave, never realizing that their words only reminded her how alone she truly was. And when evening came, bringing a brief moment of stillness, she returned inside with her sons, serving them food, listening to their small stories, forcing a gentle smile that felt heavier than all her work. Combined, making sure they felt safe, making sure they felt loved, even if it meant losing herself in the process. And once the house fell silent and the world outside slowed down, she finally allowed her guard to drop, sitting alone in the dim light where no one could see her, her thoughts growing louder in the quiet, her heart releasing the pain she had locked away all day, tears falling softly as she stared into nothing, questioning how long she could continue like this, questioning if anyone would ever notice the parts of her that were breaking. But every time those thoughts grew too strong, she wiped her tears, took a deep breath, and reminded herself that she had no choice but to keep going, because for her, stopping was never an option, and being strong was not a decision anymore. It had become her only way to exist. The next morning arrived without comfort, yet something in the air felt unfamiliar. As if the routine she had followed for years was about to shift in a way she could not control, and while she moved through her work with the same quiet determination, she noticed a figure standing near the edge of the ranch, a stranger who did not speak or interrupt, simply watching with a calm presence that felt out of place in her world of constant struggle. And unlike others who passed by with quick glances or empty praise, he stayed, observing the small details she thought no one ever saw. The way her hands trembled for a moment before lifting heavy tools, the brief pause she took when she thought no one was looking, the silent sigh she released as she carried more weight than she should, and his stillness made her uneasy because she was not used to being seen beyond the surface she showed the world, so she tried to ignore him, continuing her tasks with even more focus, but his presence lingered like a quiet question she could not answer. And when her sons ran past him, laughing without concern, he greeted them gently, his voice soft yet steady, earning their trust in a way that felt natural, not forced, and she watched from a distance, unsure why his simple actions stirred something deep inside her, something she had buried long ago. And as the hours passed, he offered help without stepping too close, fixing a loose gate with careful hands, carrying water without expecting gratitude, never demanding attention, never crossing a line, yet somehow becoming impossible to overlook. And she found herself noticing him in return, wondering who he was and why he chose to stay in a place where most people only came to leave. And when the sun began to lower, painting the sky with fading light, she finally walked toward him, not out of curiosity but because something in his quiet understanding felt heavier than silence, and before she could speak, he looked at her with eyes that held no judgment, no pity, only a calm awareness that made her feel exposed in a way she had never experienced, and for a moment, words failed her, because she realized he had already seen more than she had ever allowed anyone to see, and in that stillness, she felt a strange tension rise within her, a mix of fear and something else she could not name, as if her carefully built walls were beginning to crack without her permission. That silence stretched between them as the fading light wrapped the ranch in a soft glow, and she felt her heartbeat grow louder with every passing second. Unsure why his presence carried such weight, and then he finally spoke, his voice calm yet deeply sincere, not trying to impress her or praise her strength like everyone else had done for years, but reaching a place inside her she had hidden from the world, and as his eyes held hers without hesitation, he asked gently, "You take care of everyone, but who takes care of you?" And the moment those words reached her, something inside her froze, because no one had ever asked her that before, not her neighbors, not the people who respected her, not even herself, and she opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out, only a quiet breath that carried years of unspoken emotions, and for the first time in her life, she felt exposed without doing anything at all, as if he had seen through every layer she had built to protect herself, and her mind searched for an answer, something simple, something strong, something that would keep her image intact. But there was nothing there, only an empty space where her own needs had been forgotten, and her eyes slowly dropped as the truth settled in, heavy and undeniable, and in that moment, she realized how long she had been living without care, without support, without anyone noticing the cost of her strength, and the walls she had built over the years began to crack under the weight of a single question, and she felt a wave of emotion rise within her, something she had pushed down every single day, something she had refused to face because she believed she did not have the luxury to feel it, and her hands trembled slightly as she tried to hold herself together, but it was different now, because his question did not judge her, it did not demand anything from her, it simply reminded her of something she had lost, and as the last light of the sun faded behind the hills, she stood there in complete silence, unable to hide behind her usual strength, unable to pretend that everything was fine, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel the truth she had been running from, that she had been taking care of everyone except herself, and she had no idea how to change that. And as she looked back at him with eyes filled with quiet confusion and hidden pain, she realized that this moment was not just a question, it was the beginning of something she could not yet understand, but deep inside. She knew nothing would ever be the same again. She stood there as the weight of that moment settled deep inside her, and instead of pushing it away like she always had, she allowed it to stay, and that alone felt unfamiliar, almost frightening, because for years she had trained herself to ignore anything that made her feel weak, yet now those feelings refused to disappear, and as the night slowly covered the ranch, she walked back toward her home with a quieter step, her mind filled with thoughts she could no longer silence, and when she entered, her sons looked at her the same way they always did, trusting, unaware, but something in her gaze had changed, something softer, something uncertain, and for the first time she did not rush to hide it, she simply sat with them, listening more closely, noticing how much they had grown, how often they had tried to understand her without asking, and later, when the house became still, she did not isolate herself in the dark like before. Instead she remained present, allowing the silence to feel different rather than heavy, and the next morning arrived with the same responsibilities, yet she approached them with a slightly open heart, noticing the stranger again as he worked quietly nearby, and instead of ignoring him, she accepted his help without resistance, which felt like breaking a rule she had followed her entire life. And days began to pass with small changes that no one else could fully see, moments where she paused, without guilt, moments where she allowed others to carry a part of the weight she once believed was hers alone, and her son started to notice too, offering help more freely, speaking to her with a deeper care that had always been there but never given space to grow, and though it was not easy, though her instincts still pushed her to remain guarded, she slowly began to understand that strength did not mean standing alone, it meant trusting someone enough to stand beside her, and one evening, as she sat outside watching the sky fade once more, she realized that the emptiness she had carried for so long was no longer as heavy, because she was no longer denying her own need to be seen, and as she glanced toward the man who had asked that simple yet powerful question, she felt a quiet sense of change within her, not loud, not sudden, but real, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to accept something she had never believed she deserved, the right to be cared for, the right to not be alone, and that acceptance marked the beginning of a new strength, one that came not from tahmilu everything in silence, but from allowing connection to exist where loneliness once lived. Those days turned into quiet moments of understanding. She no longer felt like she was fighting the world alone, and even though the ranch still demanded hard work and life still tested her strength, something inside her had finally found peace. because she was no longer hiding her pain behind silence or pretending to be unbreakable for everyone around her, and her sons began to stand beside her not just as children but as support she had unknowingly raised, while the man who once asked a simple question remained a steady presence, never forcing change but always reminding her that she was seen. And in those small yet powerful shifts, she discovered a truth she had ignored for years, that real strength was never about tahmilu everything without help. It was about trusting someone enough to share the weight, and as she looked across the land she had saved, she realized she had also saved herself, not by holding on, but by finally letting someone in.